And yes, and so sorry, so we're going to be atlasing to maximize efficiency, we're atlasing to maximize accuracy, and we're atlasing under challenging conditions. This is often what we're going to be calling remote blocks, or blocks that are relatively far away from population centers. So the workshop overview is a couple different sections. So first, I'm going to talk about a greater focus on priority blocks. Glenn has already mentioned some of the things I'm going to talk about in the main presentation that he gave, but I'll go into a little more detail about how you could use tools that are out there to find priority blocks that we need more data from, and specifically what species we need more data from. Glenn's going to talk about new block completion criteria for remote blocks. We've kind of changed how remote blocks work in the state, and he'll be going over that more. Glenn will also be talking about how to atlas efficiently when you're in remote areas. And I think these are lots of like on-the-ground tips for how to get these things done in an effective manner. And I'll be talking about tools for remote atlasing. So mostly I'll be talking about how you can use smartphones, particularly smartphones, but other GPS, also GPSs to a smaller degree, how we can use those to make sure that our time spent atlasing can be as productive as possible. And then we do a Q&A at the end. And like I said earlier, initially we were planning on having that just be through chat, but with only 20 some people, maybe we can just sort of have a kind of straightforward question and answer session there. So the workshop rules, as you all noticed, your mics are muted right now, though that might change later. If you have a question while we're talking, just write it in chat. Either Glenn or I will respond to it, or get the speaker to attend to it, whenever it's kind of makes the most sense. We have time for that Q&A at the end presentation, so we can get to kind of longer form questions, or just kind of get general questions that wasn't related to anything specific we talked about. This workshop will be recorded, as we've already mentioned, as I almost forgot to record it, which would have been bad. And if you want to leave this workshop, this actually doesn't work. So if you want to leave this workshop, you need to go find the link from the main the main sort of discussion branch that we had previously. You have to go find the correct link for the intermediate or the kind of beginners workshop. So if you're having a problem with that, just let one of us know. I have all the links, and I can send the right one to you if you want to be somewhere else. Okay, that said, I'm going to start talking about identifying priority blocks. And so priority blocks, Glenn already mentioned this, we have information on effort data from all the blocks that we have throughout the state. And so what we want here is we want to find ways of using the data that we have to kind of maximize where we should be putting our effort, right? So just like briefly, Glenn already said this, but like we have USGS quads that are throughout the state. Each one of these quads has 6 atlas blocks in them, and then one of the 6 atlas blocks is selected as a priority block. It's usually the northwestern block in the quad, but that's not always true. If there was limited access or there's other reasons we didn't always do that. And additionally, Maine biologists selected blocks as specialized blocks that also have received priority. So when you look at blocks, at least in eBird, you'll see everything that has a priority, that's a priority block will have a black border. Some of those are priority blocks, which are these sort of like spatially segregated blocks that are throughout the state of Maine. And then some of them are specialty blocks, which means they're selected for a reason that we think there's something important happening in that block that we want to make sure that we measure. Given that our atlas focus needs to be on priority blocks moving forward, how do we know what to do given we already have 2 years of data? So you already know the answer to this. Glenn has talked about this before, but I wanted to go over this in a little bit more detail and make sure that people are kind of aware of how many tools are available to them on the eBird atlas map. So I'm going to click on this, and hopefully this continues to work. Glenn, you yell at me if this doesn't work. So if you click through that link, which is the same links that we were showing in chat before, you can go to the Maine Bird Atlas eBird effort map. And this is, Glenn was kind of showing chunks of this in the previous presentation, but here you can go through and find how much information we have on each one of our blocks. So you can obviously zoom in and zoom out. It's just sort of like Google Maps is on your computer. And when you get, I will note that when you're at really large spatial scales like this, sometimes not all the blocks don't all come in, and it can look like maybe things are missing. It's just because you're really far out. But if we zoom in on an area, you can see what I mean. Sorry, I clicked on a block and it's doing some helpful things. So you can see that we have varying levels of effort. We have the effort down here in the bottom right, or how much effort that is, and then we have the blocks that are priority blocks that are surrounded in black, and then the blocks that are complete that are totally blacked out, right? And so often what you might want to do is you might want to go to a place and say, look, well, as Glenn was using an example, he's like, I live around here, maybe I can go to one of these priority blocks. You can click on the block, right? And it'll tell you what we know about it. It tells you how much diurnal effort has occurred in there, how much nocturnal effort occurred in there, how many completed checklists, confirmed species, and so on. And let's say we want to know more about this block in Carmel. We can click on block data, and this is where it gets very helpful. In this case, there's only 2 atlasers and 3 checklists. It looks like Finn was doing some work here last year, and actually I think Finn's in this meeting, so thank you, Finn. As part of his job as a point count technician, he was doing some atlasing work afterwards, and he submitted a bunch of checklists, right? And so here we can see all the different species that have been observed, where they were observed, the date they were observed, and how much breeding evidence we have for them. And so it also tells you who the top atlaser is if you're the kind of competitive type who wants to be the top atlaser in a location. So you can go through and it'll, the only thing I don't love is I wish it kind of highlighted the ones that were confirmed, so it was very obvious to you which ones you didn't need to care about, but it'll tell you which species that are there and which species have been seen so far, which species have been confirmed. And I think this is all very useful information. It can be very helpful to know that if you see a Canada goose, you don't need to worry about finding any goslings. You can just ignore that Canada goose and say that you observed it and move on and go maybe try to track down this Canada warbler that you heard just moments ago or whatever. So these can be very, very helpful bits of information. They also let you know who's doing the work. So if you want to if someone has done some birding in that area, you can ask about maybe what they did or where to go, or if they had any problems. It also will tell you, you can look at the recent visits and you can kind of get the different actual lists of the person as well, who done the visiting. So if you click on individual observations, it'll tell you what was going on in that particular list and what was happening on that particular day. So the main recommendation here is that if you are in the middle of planning a trip, or you want to get a new block, and you've surveyed all the priority blocks close to you, or maybe there's a priority block close to you that you want to start surveying, you can look here and say, okay, well, there's been 6 hours of surveys in Albion. Let's look at the block data. Let's figure out what people have seen. We don't have Canada goose confirmed yet. That seems easy. Maybe we go do that. And these data are very helpful. Oh, you can sort. Oh, thank you, Tom. Yeah, you can also sort by those lists as well. That's true. So yeah, I'll just demonstrate that real quick, actually. But yes, if you click on breeding evidence, it'll sort it based on which ones have which evidence, right? So in this case, the confirmed ones come to the top, so we know that these 7 species have been confirmed, and that we should be looking at these next ones down. So that's the Maine bird atlas. That's the eBird portal information that I wanted to talk about. I wanted just to make sure people were clear. I guess I can click on a complete block real quick just to show you people. That looks like it does say block status complete. It'll give you the complete check mark up here, and it'll tell you what that all means too. But hopefully what we're doing is clicking on incomplete blocks and trying to get data from those areas. So yeah, that is what I wanted to mention about the new focus on priority blocks. It's very obvious from this which ones need effort data. I will say the effort data on this is not perfect, but it is good enough. The blocks that are complete should be getting updated very frequently. And this is going to be your best way to know, like, if I'm going to go do a thing, or if I'm going to go do some atlasing, what area you could go to sort of do the most, and what species you should be focused on. So any kind of quick questions about the Maine Bird Atlas eBird effort map, and how you can use that to help yourself out? Excellent. Okay. So as always, the links are in the presentations, and they'll be obvious, and they'll be easily accessible to people who want those for whatever reason. So at this point, I need to pass it over to Glenn. Glenn, are you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can start.
I will take over here and see if we have any luck this time. No, I guess. Well, give it a minute. Maybe I will. But
What kind of luck are we hoping for here?
but we'll just jump right ahead, see if I can advance a slide this time.
Okay.
Ah, I can. Look at that. We're golden.
Excellent.
So yeah, hopefully my audio is coming through well enough, as long as I'm not sending any video on this. Good.
You
So
sound great. Yep.
with you guys, the advanced atlasers, I want to make sure you have the tools to be as efficient as possible in the field. So we're going to go into the weeds with our new block completion formulas, because that'll help you be the most efficient you can when you're out in remote areas. So I had mentioned earlier that there are 975 priority blocks in the state, all those pink and green ones. And we have a goal of getting 1/3 of the priority blocks completed in each region by the end of this year. So this isn't an arbitrary number that we've pulled out of the hat. It's we've studied Wisconsin's Atlas effort. They've completed their effort, and Virginia's, who's ahead of us on theirs. And we saw what benchmarks they cleared by the end of the 3rd year of the Atlas. And this seems like an important benchmark we need to start focusing on. So all these pie graphs here for each region show how close we are to having 1/3 of the blocks done, priority blocks done in the region. And it's not surprising, we're doing quite well in some areas where there's lots of birders. And we got a lot of work to do in some areas as well, you know, the down east area as well. And so in order to, you know, really start completing blocks in these remote areas, I want to make sure you guys have all the tools you need to be efficient. So we revised our block completion formulas or rules this last winter. And you can think of it as the 20-40-60 rule. But first, let's talk about the old formula. And this applied to all blocks anywhere in the state. You had to get 20+ hours of survey effort in a block, and over 50% of the coded species needed to be confirmed breeders. And that was anywhere you were in the state. And we were finding that a lot of people, in order to reach that 50% confirmed benchmark, needed to spend a lot more than 20 hours in the block in order to complete it. And so that's one reason why we've revised things. And we've got two revised formulas for block completion. And it depends upon whether or not the block is remote or not. And we define remote as any block with less than 5 hours of survey effort in the first 2 years of the Atlas. So there's a lot of them that will be termed remote. The birders in 2 years, birders really haven't been getting out to those. But first, let's talk about the first revision, which is non-remote blocks. So non-remote blocks, you still need to put 20 or more hours into a block. And we've lowered the percent confirmed breeders, so it needs to be greater than 40% confirmed. So we've lowered that a bit, but we've added a separate criteria. It also, that's an and statement, it also needs to have greater than 60% of the coded breeders be in this confirmed plus probable category. And for the remote blocks, we figured that really for a lot of the advanced atlasers going remote, 15 hours of effort is good enough. You can do a block adequately in 15 or more hours of effort. You can see that these criteria are the same: greater than 40% confirmed, greater than 60% confirmed plus probable, but here's the difference. You only need to meet one of these. So if you can push a block over 40% confirmed breeders or over 60% confirmed plus probable breeders, we can code that as complete. So that's a big change, and it really puts a lot more emphasis on these probable breeding behaviors, which to remind you is agitated behavior, visiting probable nest site, courtship, territorial defense, a pair in suitable habitat, and even these lower codes, 7 or more birds singing in an atlas, anywhere in an atlas block on the same day, or a singing species present at the same location 7 or more days apart. And I've circled these and put a little calendar next to them because, as you guys probably know, these codes need to be within the safe dates for the species. So it's important to not ignore these probable breeding behaviors, because now that can really make a huge difference in pushing especially these remote blocks over the edge and allowing us to call them as complete. So now I want to switch over and we'll go into eBird and let's look up the Addison Northwest block and see if it's complete. And let's see if I have any luck. And hang on. There, do you guys see the Atlas eBird page? Great.
Yes.
So yeah, I always check this upper left-hand corner. You know you're in the Atlas portal. You're on the eBird page. It'll say it up there. But I'm sure you guys have all explored this before. So I'm going to go into Washington County. So I'm sure you guys have seen this. It'll tell you 105 total priority blocks in Washington County. 11 of them are considered complete. That's less than 11%, 10.5% complete. We've got a ways to push that over 30% by the end of this year, but that's not what I want to show you. I don't know if everyone has explored this tab before, the blocks. So this lists all the blocks within Washington County, and it gives us all the statistics that we really need to figure out block completion. And then where I go to calculate block completion. So you can copy and paste this into an Excel file, and this is exactly what I do when I calculate block completions. And I've got some formulas set up that just automatically figures it out and flags which ones I can now consider complete. So there's a lot of good, useful info here, but what I want to focus on is, I'd mentioned the Addison Northwest block. You can see it's a priority block. And this tells us how much, how close we are in this particular block. So it has over 12.5 hours of effort, no nocturnal hours, 61 total coded species, 19 of those are confirmed, 4 probable, and 38 possible. It's interesting that people aren't really using these probable breeding categories that much. It's showing up in this block, but let's look down the list. It happens a lot. People are either focused on confirmed codes or they just keep it as possible. So we need to start focusing a bit on these probable codes because that can make a big difference in what enabling us to consider a block complete. So let me see if I can go back to the slides here. Not yet. It's just not letting me advance it once again, but let me try one more time.
Are
Or
you
if not, I'll
clicking? Can you click on the slide with your mouse and then try to advance it?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It might not have had it selected. It might have had like Zoom selected or something. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So great. Yeah, it looks like it's working now. So, so I've pasted in the info from the Addison Northwest block here. 61 coded species, 4 probable, 19 confirmed, and that confirmed plus probable category, 23 species. So I put that in here. So it's not considered a remote block because it has more than 5 hours of effort in the first 2 years of the atlas. So it needs to create, it needs to clear both of those benchmarks. 31% confirmed, we're pretty close. It needs 8 hours of effort, 30%, to pushing that up to 40% confirmed breeders, that's doable. But the effort really hasn't been put into the probable category. We're quite a bit shy on that criteria. So again, don't ignore the probable breeding behaviors. They're more important than ever now, and especially working in remote blocks. So hopefully that all made sense. And I'm going to switch. Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, quick question from Charles. Is there a list of remote priority blocks available? Do we have that?
No, I don't think we've created a list. Really, I go to that Atlas effort map that you showed, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
That really can show you the blocks to focus on. But the question might also be related to, what happens in the last year of the project.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
it has to be less than 5 hours of effort in the first 2 years of the project for us to consider it remote.
mm-hmm.
You can actually look that up, but in a sense, we sweat all those details on our end. I just wanted to give this group the tools to be able to know how those calculations work so they can be most efficient in the field.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Well,
that's enough of an answer for Chuck.
yeah, I mean, if it's something that people really want, it wouldn't be very difficult for us to put that together. So I guess if the demand is very high, then I don't think that would take much time for us to do. Sandy Duchesne had a kind of broader concern. I don't know if we want to talk about this now. This is kind of like a bigger picture question about like her essential question is she's concerned about the science. The new formula is going to lower the requirements, and do we have enough data from these blocks to have kind of this completion be statistically valid? This is like a larger issue. Do you want to talk about any of this now, or should we sort of move that to the Q&A?
Yeah, no, we can touch on it now. I'm not sure we're going to have a great answer because really what we're trying to weigh being able to complete these 975 remote priority blocks, and we're not on track to complete that. And so, I think it's more important that we're able to get some good breeding bird data from all 975 of those priority blocks. rather than, you know, better data on a smaller percentage of those. And, you know, some other atlases actually don't even, you know, they have lower criteria than what we're using. That, you know, they figure the probable code really is good evidence of breeding. And is it really worth the extra effort to put those up to a confirmed level? And some atlases say, you know, no, it really isn't. Um, it's not, you know, it does take a lot more effort to get confirmed breeders, and maybe that effort could be better spent getting better widespread coverage. So those are the kind of things we're weighing on all of this. Do you want to add anything to that, Evan?
I mean, you actually kind of said exactly what I said, kind of in a brief response in chat, is that we're trying to get people um, to kind of get out of the blocks they have been and go into more new blocks. Speaking to the statistical validity of it, I think those are some interesting questions. I can talk more later about how we're actually using the Atlas data and statistical models. I mean, just know that like no completed, I mean, completed blocks don't have every bird confirmed in them. I mean, and so we know that the completion rates are a function of effort. And essentially what we need is enough data to know what the shape of that relationship is for species. And if we know that, then it makes it easier for us to figure out which blocks haven't been surveyed enough for a given species to know if we should get a probable or a confirmed location from it. So we're going to be trying to understand that the best we can. And I personally think that it's better to, like, if you gave me two choices, if you said like, we're going to have 10% of the state with all the birds confirmed, or we're going to have 50% of the state with all the birds probable, I would probably take the second. I would much rather have the spatial coverage and the lack of breeding certainty. Now, it's not to say you shouldn't confirm your birds, you should. But I think what we're trying to say here is we're trying to emphasize the importance of trying to get to all these hard to get to locations. Because I think that's one of the true values of an atlas, is that we can get information from places that people just don't go very often, and Maine has lots of those. Sandy also says, it's kind of an interesting question, if she has extra time, is it better to complete somebody's block that's close to completion, or begin a lightly birded remote priority block, Glenn? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd say lightly birded remote priority block.
Yeah, because someone else might accidentally complete that block, right? Who's not as good a birder as you.
Yeah, but that's related to what I'm going to talk about next, which is Atlas ninjas and block busting.
Cool. Well, we're out of questions, so we can move on.
And so the first time I saw the term Atlas Ninja, it was on the Wisconsin Breeding Bird Atlas. I don't know if they call the term or what, but what it is really a skilled atlaser really focusing down on finding these remote priority blocks that are nearly complete. They just didn't quite get there. And so, and they use the knowledge that they have on what it's going to take to bring those blocks, you know, to complete a block, those blocks. And then they, you know, very precisely, they go into that block, they find the additional breeding confirmations that they need, and they get out of there so they can do another one. And so that is really helpful. And as we near the end of this project, this is going to be even more important, that we need a group of folks focusing on that. And so an Atlas Ninja would know the region that needs the help for this year. You know, if you're down in Cumberland County and, you know, it wouldn't be as helpful to complete some of those blocks. They've already cleared the 1/3 of the priority blocks completed, but you know, there's a couple places not too far away where they need help in clearing that 1/3 of the priority blocks completed at the end of this year. And then, you know, going into the Atlas effort map to say, okay, here's, you know, you're focusing on these darker colored priority blocks. which ones are kind of almost there, that with a little bit of effort and precise atlasing, you can get in there and complete it and get out of there again. Um, and you got to know these, these block completion formulas to be, for this kind of precise atlasing. So remembering the greater than 15 or 20 hours of effort, greater than 40% confirmed breeders, or this greater than 60% confirmed plus probable if you're working in a remote area. So using all that information to really do some precise atlasing, finishing as many priority blocks as you can in a short amount of time, which leads us into something related, which is just block busting, which typically you work as a group in one or more remote priority blocks with really not much birding data in it. That's one of the differences. And with our current distancing measures with COVID-19, group block busting is really not something that can happen this year. But it's fine to start thinking outside the box. So, solo block busting, I'm going to talk about, and what Bob Duchesne coined as asocial block busting. Those could be a way to think about doing some block busting this year. So when I brought up solo block busting to the Atlas staff a week or two ago, they got a chuckle out of it and said, well, isn't that just atlasing? And yeah, maybe it is, but it's kind of solo block busting maybe. So it can be done. So I thought I'd just outline, well, what's the difference between a single trip block bust versus a multi-trip remote block bust? So if it's going to take, for a remote area, 15 or more hours to complete a remote block, if I'm doing it all in a single trip, I need to camp out. Spend 2 or 3 days there to finish that up. And if I'm only there for 2 or 3 days, I can't use the S7 breeding code, which is a bird singing at the same location 7 or more days apart. And as I pointed out, those probable breeding codes are more important than ever now. So contrast that with a multi-trip solo block bust, remote block bust. So you could make 2 or 3 single day trips, no camping needed. Space your days over 7 days apart, your trips over 7 days apart. You can take advantage of that S7 breeding code. Those probable breeding codes are really important. So, that's one way to think outside the box of, how to make this work this summer. And, asocial block busting, which Bob Duchesne mentioned in an email the other day. And I think it's a great idea. You carve up a remote block into different routes. You assign the routes to various friends or folks by email or a Zoom chat. And then everyone individually birds their assigned routes, and it doesn't need to be done on the same day. And then they e-bird the results. And if they're not on the same day, that birding can build on what was done before. And then when the block is finished, celebrate the victory with participants over a video chat. I think this is, a great way of thinking outside the box on what might be possible this year. But one thing I want to point out with all of this remote atlasing, since, with this group, we're talking about a lot of remote atlasing stuff, is we really can't take risks this summer. We don't want to have to get rescued if we're stuck in a road, stuck in a ditch. This is not the year to take risks. It's very important to be as independent as possible when traveling to remote areas. I think the biggest reason is some of these remote communities that we'd be traveling through or stopping at, they're at high risk with a large elderly population that we don't want our travels to put that community at higher risk. And so if you're going to stop to buy gas or supplies, encountering people, you really got to plan for it and think about the risks that you might be, the higher risk you might be bringing into a community by your presence there. So really, some best practices for remote atlasing. Again, this is not the year to take risks in your travels. Stay 6 feet or more away from people. Minimize your stops to buy groceries, gas, or supplies. Use hand sanitizer before going into stores or pumping gas at a gas station. And wear face masks when in stores, even if no one else is. I think of it as we really need to protect the communities that we're going into, and face masks are a great way to protect those communities. And if you're sick at all with anything, just stay home. So just to summarize on the bits that I've gone over here in this last little bit, advanced atlasers can help the Maine Bird Atlas by focusing their activity on priority blocks when possible this year. We've got a lot of them to complete. If it's possible, travel to an atlas in remote areas of high need, but being careful not to put these remote communities at greater risk. Recruit a friend to the Maine Bird Atlas and help get them started. Zoom is a really good platform. You can share a screen, you can teach them how to eBird, how to get started. You don't need personal contact to get somebody started with atlasing. And lastly, consider sponsoring a species for the Maine Bird Atlas that gets your name mentioned in the published atlas on the species page. And the money raised from that is used for travel grants to atlasers willing to work remotely. So to just flip that around a little bit, if you guys could benefit by getting some travel grants to work in remote areas, I'd encourage you to apply for these travel grants. That's what they're designed for. That's why people are sponsoring species, is to help us, make it possible to get into these remote areas. And the last, I think this is my last slide. I'd encourage you all to think about why is it important? Why are we putting in this effort to atlas? And I think for me, what really drives me out of bed, into areas where it isn't that fun to bird, it's really, I think about, I consider that I'm working for this next generation of Maine biologists, and I don't want to let them down and, really leave a whole lot of gaps in our knowledge about the current state of bird populations. And I'd encourage all of you to think about what might be an important reason why you're all atlasing and spending time. Oh, and this must be my last slide, that if you have any questions, you can always email me, mainbirdatlas@gmail.com. I'm happy to help clear up anything. We do have these weekly Q&A sessions. You can find out about them on the Maine Bird Atlas Facebook group and Atlas website as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Evan.
Quick question from Barbara. They wanted to get that 1/3 pie chart map on top of the block map. I don't know if that, I don't know. I know that was just a map that you made from the data that we had, but is it possible to get that that information out to people?
Yeah, I can email it to this whole group.
Okay, excellent.
So I'll do that sometime after the session ends.
Wonderful. All right, so I am, what am I doing? I am starting back up. 1 second. Okay. Okay, Glenn, we're all good? You can see my screen again?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. 1 sec, I'm grabbing a couple things just so I don't miss stuff. Okay, great. So with our last sort of non-Q&A session, I was going to give people some helpful tips on how they can use their smartphone to make their jobs easier in remote atlasing sessions. So what I'm going to be doing is mostly just doing a demonstration of how you can kind of get things on your phone that are helpful. And I've kind of picked some things, but if there's other things people want to know how to do, I can certainly help people out. As Glenn said, we're around to help for this process, right? Hold on, I'm now minus slides, not advancing. All right, so there's kind of two main ways you can use various data to help your atlasing efforts: smartphones and GPSs. We're going to be focused on smartphones today. If you have a GPS that you can use for kind of the similar things we talked about today, please email mainbirdatlas@gmail. That's going for the needed files and instructions. I'll note that some GPSs have the capacity to show like shape files and grid files like the atlas blocks, and some don't. And it depends on how old they are, more or less, and how expensive and all that stuff. So you might not be able to do everything that we talked about today on your GPS, but you can certainly do a lot of things. But I'll be focusing on the smartphone. So what I'll be doing is talking about, I'll be actually working off my phone here, and hopefully this all goes smoothly. So I'm going to be sharing my phone screen to the computer screen, so hopefully everyone can see that. I'll be showing you how we can do a variety of things. So there's not much going to be happening in this PowerPoint slide. I just kind of have it up for my own personal use, honestly. But also just for archiving links and kind of describing what we're going to do. So the first thing is I want to talk about how we can make sure that we have the local maps downloaded onto Google Maps, so that when you're traveling in areas that don't have great cell coverage, you can actually just sort of locally download all that information, and so you don't actually need a connection to the cell network to get directions or maps of where you are. I guess the one thing that's also valuable to point out is that, like, travel with a gazetteer, don't rely on your cell phone for all things, but you can use your smartphones for things, and this is one of them, and this can be a helpful thing to do. So we're going to transfer over to my phone, hopefully this will all go. All right, it should be working. Okay, so now, Glenn, can you just confirm that you can see this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is my phone. I have an iPhone, so these instructions will be a little bit different if you have an Android, but I'm just going to show you on the iPhone how this all works. And I will try not to reveal too much personal information to you while we do this. First, we just want to talk about how we get Google Maps to download a local map. So the first thing we're going to do is going to click on Google Maps. You're going to have to download it off the App Store, obviously, if you don't have it. But and I'll also note that this doesn't work in like Apple Maps, really. It's a different process. So I would say we're focusing on Google because Google has a bunch of free resources that all essentially you need is a Google account, and you get access to a lot of different things. And you don't need to spend any money on it. You do need to give them, you do need an account, which is, certainly one thing. But the thing here is that we want to make sure that we have the local map that we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our profile picture, which is up there in the top right. And then we're going to click on offline maps, which is right here. Once you're in offline maps, you can actually hit the select your own map button at the top, which I will do. And then what this does is this actually shows for you the map that you want to download. So you can actually, I'm just like pinch zooming, I'm just moving in and out, and you can select a pretty large area that you want. So let's say that you have a survey over in Bridgeton that you want to do. You can come in there and select a map that's very close. Or you can actually just make it really, really big, and you can say, actually, I want the entire, southern Maine area, and that's just southern Maine, southern and western. And then all you do is you're going to click on download in the bottom right corner there, and I'll just show you what that looks like. And then it begins downloading. So downloads, it just happens while you're on Wi-Fi. It won't really do it on a cell network. This doesn't take too long, and that's a pretty big chunk of area. Once you've done that, essentially, like anytime you're in this area, even if you don't have a good cell connection, you can get directions and you can get terrain and you can get satellite data from all these areas, which is quite helpful. And so this can be really, really useful, particularly when you're off in the middle of nowhere. And since I'm going to give you a bunch of instructions for how to essentially use Google Maps to navigate the places, that's a big first step to make sure that you have all that stuff offline available. It does take space on your phone, but as you can tell, it's not that much. It's 65, 71 megabytes. It's not too bad. So I highly recommend this, going through that process. So I'm going to now, let's see, what am I going to do? Right, okay, so now I'm going to stop this section here. Oh, hold on, there we go, exit the full screen. And I'm gonna go to my computer. So now we're just gonna go on other places on my computer and I can show you what we're gonna talk about. So the thing that I want to talk about next is sort of how you can set your own data points and put them into your phone so you can navigate to them. So like the use case here is that, like, let's say you want to go to 3 different places in a block, and you know that these are like 3 really good birding areas, and you know them beforehand, and you want to make sure you can navigate to them effectively, or you just have them in your phone so you just kind of know where you are relative to them at all points in time. So I'm going to show you how we can pick out points, put them on a phone, and use them, and then navigate to them. So the thing we're going to need to do this is Google Earth. And the best thing to do, the best way to do this is, so Google Earth is, if you haven't used it recently, it's gotten a little more complicated. They now have 3 versions, as you can see at the top of this page. They have Google Earth on the web, they have Google Earth on mobile, and they'll have Google Earth Pro on desktop. Now while Google Earth on the web is fine, it's actually a totally cool service that's neat. It can't do what we want it to do exactly. So what we're going to need here is we're going to need Google Earth on mobile, which you can download via the App Store or the equivalent on any sort of device. And we're going to need Google Earth Pro on your desktop. So if you don't have this, just go to google.com/earth/versions and you can get you can download Google Earth Pro today. It used to cost money. It used to be kind of this like expert level thing that they had, but now it's just free and it's quite good. So what we're going to do is we're going to download Google Earth Pro, which I already have, and I'm going to log in. Well, I don't even know if you need to log in precisely, but I'm going to load it up. And so let me just zoom out real quick so you can kind of see. This is like your standard Google Earth kind of view. You're going to have the Earth that you can kind of move around. It's all terrain based. You have a ton of different things that you can sort of pop in and pop out. But what I'm going to talk about is, let's say we want to do some surveys maybe around Sebago Lakes region. So we can use Google Earth to navigate out to this region, and we can kind of look at some areas, right? And so let's say I don't have the blocks map loaded up on this. That would have been too convenient. But let's say we have Atlas blocks on here, and we know this is in a certain block that is priority block and that we're interested in. So in Google Earth, what we can do is we can use this little button up here that says Add Place Mark. And we can use this to add points to this map. So I can add a new place mark. Let's say we want to go to that area there, and we can say Atlas. Hit OK. And so what we've done is we just added a point, right? We just added a point to this, to Google Earth. We can also add another point. Let's say we also want to maybe check out this area here. We'll call it Atlas Spot 2. Oops, keep spelling spot wrong. So now that we've done that, we've now just sort of added data, right? And so I can, obviously I can add these kind of wherever I want to add them, and there's really no limit on where I can put them. I will note that if you try to navigate to some of these, if they're not very close to roads, those directions are going to get bad at some point, but Google will try to get you to the place that is closest. So what we're going to do is we need to sort of bundle these points up and ship them somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the right-hand side under My Places, and I'm going to go Add Folder. So I'm adding a new folder. I'm going to call this the Advanced Atlasing Workshop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those 2 points that I just made, and I'm going to move them into that folder. So they get moved in there. So now we have these 2 points inside this folder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to click Save Place As. And so I'm going to just save this to my desktop. I'm going to save Advanced Atlasing Workshop example. Yep. And what I did is I just saved a KMZ file. Now a KMZ file is a spatial, it's a data file that has geometry. So it's saving all the spatial information about this, right? So if I click on Atlas spot here, oops, if you click on properties, it's telling me the latitude and the longitude of that spot. And so what it's doing is it's saving all that information and moving it into a file that sort of keeps that all safe. So now what we can do, if we want to see this on our phone, what we want to do is go to, sorry, I'm going to go back to the presentation here. We got to go to Google Maps and My Maps. And so I have a link here. It's google.com/maps/d gets you there. I'm just going to follow this link, but this is where you need a Google account. So what it's going to do is it's going to, oops, this is actually the wrong, that's not going to be helpful. One sec, sorry, I have multiple Google accounts. I have a work account, and I don't want this to be under the work account, actually. Okay, so this is the same thing under my personal account. And so when you go there, what you find is this page. You have a list of maps that you've made, and they either you own or there's been shared with you or a number of other things. So what you can do though is you can go and hit create a new map, which takes a second. So now we go out to this zone, and we're just seeing all of the US here. And now we can add a variety of layers of data. So you can't add things that are that big. So you can't really add the Atlas grid to this, for example, though that would be nice. But what you can do is it says untitled map. So we're going to call this Advanced Atlasing Workshop. You can add a description if you want. I'm not going to. And you can add multiple layers. So you can add as many layers, well, not as many, but you can add data as much data as you want. You can add different base maps. So we can use a satellite terrain map instead of using the hybrid map that they were using before. But here, all I'm going to show you is just, I'm just going to delete these guys so we don't have to worry about them. I'm going to show you just how we take, so we can add the data that we just created to this map. So what I'm going to do is you click on, sorry, I didn't talk my way through that. You're going to click on, so this untitled layer here, you're going to click on import at the bottom. And so when you do that, it's going to say, hey, why don't you pull in a file from any number of places like your Google Drive or something like that. But in my case, I just know that it's on my desktop. And so this is the thing that we just did recently, the Advanced Atlasing Workshop example. And so I can click open on that. So that's that KMZ file that we made. And what it's going to do is it's going to import them into this map. And so now we have the points that we made, these locations that we're interested in visiting, and we have them added onto a Google map. And so the advantage of this is that this is under my account as a person who has a Google account. And so these data are now going to become available to me on my phone. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my phone here. Sorry, it drops the connection after a little bit, so I have to boot it back up again here. Actually, hold on, did this get saved properly? I think it did, right? I believe so. All right, so now we're gonna go full screen on this again. We've got my phone again. We're gonna go back into Google Maps. And then at the bottom here, so this is just the splash page. We're gonna have, you see this little marker that says saved here at the bottom? We're gonna click on it. And annoyingly, if you see this list of kind of menu items at the top, lists labeled reservations following, you have to slide that to the right, and there you find maps. I don't know why they did it this way. It's really annoying, actually. But if you click on maps, which I just did, then you get to see all the various maps that you've loaded into My Maps on Google. And so you'll see that I have a couple different maps in here. I have a backup just in case something went wrong. But what we have here is the thing that we just created in the advanced atlasing workshop, excuse me. If we click on that, then we can load in the points that we have. So here's one of them. Here, let's zoom out, and there's the other, right? And so now if I was interested in traveling to one of them, you can click on that point. It says it's Atlas Spot 1, which is what we named it. And then we know that it's 32 minutes away and that we can get directions to it via from my current location, which is my house. So we know we can get there in 30 minutes or so. So essentially you can use this to kind of create whatever points you want to create. For some people, this might be more useful than others, but particularly if you're in remote locations and you want to have points that often remote locations don't have a lot of landmarks in Google that you can really use effectively. And this is a great way to sort of to kind of preload a remote atlasing trip with like, these are the locations I want to go to, and then have your phone essentially be a way to make sure that you're getting to the spots you want to get to and making sure you don't get lost and you stay safe and all those other things. I will note that, again, the GPS in your phone does not need a cell connection to work. So this, as long as you have the maps downloaded, you should be able to do that reasonably effectively. So that's how you can get information onto your phone that you didn't have there already. The last thing I'm going to show you is how we can take, how we can get block data on our phone. Now, I was creating this before eBird had sort of updated. Here, I'm going to stay with this for a second. Glenn mentioned earlier that you can see blocks now in eBird, which is true, you can. So I'm going to go into my eBird app, and I'm going to start a new checklist, and I'll show you what happens here. So you start the new checklist, the same sort of usual screen pops up, and if you click on the kind of the auto-selected map point up there, you can use that to bounce out to the map. So we're going to click over on map on the right there, and here you can see all the birding I do in my yard, and then if you zoom out enough, you can see a lot of birding locations, but you also now see the map grid, which is very helpful. So this is really good to know if you are, because this will be automatic, eBird tracks you as you move, and you'll be able to tell if you're getting close to an Atlas boundary, which is quite nice. It doesn't really tell you anything about the Atlas block though. So if at some point in time you get confused about the block, then that's not going to help you. Additionally, I think this relies on Apple Maps, not Google Maps, and I don't know, honestly, if this is going to persist when you don't have a cell network. In the past, when I've used eBird without a cell connection, I have not gotten any mapping services, and the GPS works, but it's just on like a blank screen, essentially. So I don't know if this persists into that. So I'm going to show you some tools to help us get a little bit more information locally, and also be able to, so that we know the block names and things like that, but also kind of get them in a way that I think is going to be a little more robust to low cell, bad cell connections. So hold on, let me stop this real quick so I don't. Maybe we can hide. Sorry. Delete. Okay, sorry. There's a question from Scott. Do you know if there's a way to get eBird personal spots into Google Maps in this way? I mean, if you knew the exact location, like it looked like I don't think those were personal hotspots, but like eBird will track the lat long of those hotspots, and if you had a list of those, you could just type those into Google Earth and add them as points essentially, and you could do that for sure. So yeah, the trick would just be knowing the lat longs of them and making sure you had them, which eBird has all either in. Well, if not exactly in the app, then you definitely can get it on the website. So yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, so I think, let me think, where am I starting with this? So, okay, so first I'm gonna walk you out. So we're gonna get off my phone for a second, and we're gonna go back to my presentation, and we're gonna go to one final link. We're gonna go to the IFNW Atlas Resources webpage. Okay. So this, if you haven't been here, is great. Actually, there's a lot of really useful information on here. There's everything from checklists, forms, all kinds of really useful information about safe dates and things like that. The thing that we really want, actually, and so, and this is actually what I'm going to talk about now. There's actually instructions for getting Google Earth files onto your smartphone or tablet. Glenn has written this up already. My method deviates from this only a titch, but the same thing definitely works. So I'm just going to walk through this process essentially of how you can do it on my phone, in particular with Google Earth. And so, I'm going to use the Atlas block data as an example, but you can do this with any kind of data you can load into Google Earth effectively. So that could be points like we just did. We just made a bunch of points, or it could be any other piece of information that we try to include. The cool thing is that we have the Google Earth map file with priority blocks shaded in it on the website. We also have the unshaded version if that appeals to you in any way. But all you got to do is click this guy, and we download the BBA blocks2.kmz. It's 2 because I've downloaded it 3 times, and I have not been clearing my downloads cache. But this BBA blocks KMZ file is the crucial bit to making this all work. So the trick then is to get it onto your phone. And so I'm going to show you a slightly different way than what Glenn suggests in the instructions for getting Google files on your phone, but you do have to get it locally. So if you have a Google Drive, you can just put it on Google Drive. As long as you have Google Drive app on your phone, you can just link to it straight from there. And you can also do that with Dropbox. And so you can have a free version, a free account of Dropbox. You can have a free account of Google Drive. These are all free tools available. I'm just going to show you how I do it in my world because that's what works best for me. But there are definitely other ways to do it, and we do have written instructions showing you how that works. Oops, I'm in the wrong thing. I would like to be in downloads. All right, so I just downloaded this BBA blocks 2 just now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move it over into my Dropbox folder. And once I've done that, because Dropbox is linked on my phone, I can access that information on my phone very quickly and easily. So what I'm going to do is I just downloaded it off the website. This is just the file that anybody can download. And I'm going to paste it into my Dropbox, just my base Dropbox folder. Obviously, there are many folders that you could paste it in, but this is kind of the easiest thing to do here. So once we've done that, now that's kind of it actually. Like that's the hard part really, is making sure that it's on your phone, because once it's on your phone, everything gets pretty easy from there. Google Earth is like pretty straightforward about how it lets you do this. So I'm going to start my phone mirroring again. We're going to go back to full screen view. We're going to do this. We're going to go down. Okay, so now we're going to load Google Earth onto my phone. We're going to hit this file here. So now I have started with Google Earth, and we kind of have the same thing that we had on the desktop app, right? We had same kind of information. Everything kind of looks the same, only now that it's on your phone. And so what we want to do is we want to hit on this little stack of 3 bars over here. This is what Google calls its like menu symbol. We're going to click on that menu symbol, and now you can, yeah, so it shows you what account you're under. I have multiple, so that gets confusing for me. And so what we want to do is we want to click projects. Here, we're going to click that now. And so what you can do here is now you can load files locally or from Google Drive, which is a cloud-based service. So what we're going to do is we're going to click, let me just delete that because that was me testing something earlier. We're going to click open on the top right there, and then we're going to hit import KML file. So now once we've done this, it's going to actually ask us, like, this is what it usually does. It says, well, where do you want to get this from? You can get this from files that are just on your iPhone, which you can just transfer files directly using things like iTunes if you want to use a cable. If you don't, you can use like what's it called? AirDrop, I think, is on iPhone, and Google and non-Apple phones, I think, have similar processes to getting information on there. Or you could use an iCloud Drive, which is something I don't use very much personally. Google Drive, which works just fine, or Dropbox. For me, it's just easiest to do Dropbox. So I'm going to click Dropbox, and we're going to go into my Dropbox file. It is now ordered alphabetically. And so you can see I have 3 different KNZ files, all of which are the same thing. I'm going to click the one I just downloaded, the BBA blocks 2, just to show you that that's the one that we all got together and it's going to work just fine. So we clicked that, and now we just loaded it in as a project. And so we just can click on that project, and now we have all of the BBA blocks in our phone in Google Earth. And so now Google Earth is very powerful in some ways. It's not a great navigating device. So, and the Christmas bird count, I use this to sort of keep track of where I am relative to all the different block edges. So I make sure that our winter atlasing effort doesn't stray beyond blocks, which is kind of easy to do in the Christmas bird count because you're driving around so much. And I'd say that's kind of a pain in the butt. Hold on a sec. What I want to do is actually go back. So I have this file here that I have here. I'm going to hide this one, the one I just loaded. What you can do is you can pin them to the Google Earth. Wait, nope, go away. You can pin them to your native Google Earth, so they're just in there under your regular settings. And so if you ever want to know where you are in Google Earth, you can always hit this little directional compass rose button, and it'll find your location. And when you do that, you can get obviously very, very close to where you are. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. But the nice thing about being in Google is we can actually grab information about each one of the blocks. So I can see that this is the Northwest and Southeast block. It is a regular block. And it tells me what coordinating region's in it and all of other sorts of associated information. So as you move around an area, you can use this to, hold on, let me get out of that. Go away. Here, sorry, kind of oriented. Google Earth likes to get off axis, which I find annoying. So you can look to see where you are relative to block boundaries. You can look to see where you are relative to habitat, and you can make sure that you have all the relevant information for the block that you want. So this is actually pretty. Here, well, let me just let me pull up the other one here. Because the other one, I'm not sure why that one didn't. There might have been an older version. I'm not sure why that one didn't have the color codes. But the way that Google Earth colors these is that they'll really lightly colored blocks. These ones are the priority blocks. So if you click on them, you go down, you see block type priority. So those are those lightly colored ones, and these really kind of like darker pink ones, at least this is the way it shows up on my phone. It might be different on other people's. Those are the specialty blocks. So those are also blocks that are important to us, but they're not like the priority, the spatially explicit priority blocks that we sort of discussed earlier. So it does show you the different types of block as well, which is quite nice. The green are what we call boundary or border blocks. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just green. Yeah, just note that if you're in the car, like you kind of have to constantly update your position if you're moving rapidly. If you're moving slowly, it's not that big a deal to sort of see where you are relative to all these things. But if you're moving rapidly, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't give you directions in the same way that like your Google Maps app will give you. But this is a pretty powerful tool. With eBird getting the grids in, I think it's maybe a little less important than it was previously. But it's a lot more information than they have there, which is good, and it's a little bit more robust to. It should be more robust to kind of disruption of cell signal and things like that. So with that is the end of what I was planning on showing you. I mean, if people have other questions, I'm happy to try to solve them if we have them. I see there's at least one in chat. So Glenn was saying that, well, I can't read all of that for some reason. I assume the block boundary will show up on your phone only if your default is the Bird Atlas rather than regular eBird. Can you show how to change the default portal on your phone? Absolutely. Yes, and so my portal is the Bird Atlas right now because I had a brown creeper with nesting material in my yard, and that is a confirmed breeder, and that's very important. So if we go back into my eBird account, we will find the typical eBird stuff. So if you go to my eBird, actually, is this right, or is it under more? Where is it? Oh yeah, that's under more. Okay, so you're on your regular menu screen. We're gonna. This is like your regular kind of splash page start date here. I'm gonna click more at the bottom right there. That's that button there. And you're gonna click on Settings and Account. And what we want to do is it first of all it tells you my username, which is that. It gives you kind of options for how you want to see information. And at the bottom there, it says portal, and you can click on that, and it gives you all sorts of options, right? The only ones that we should be using as Mainers should be the Maine Bird Atlas and the Maine eBird. So I actually haven't tested this. I'm actually curious to see what happens. So I clicked on the Maine eBird portal. So now all my future submissions will be done under the Maine eBird portal. And I'm actually curious to see if I start a checklist, if it has the grid. I bet it won't. I kind of hope it doesn't, because otherwise I think that would be confusing. Yeah, the grid doesn't show up. Cool. So yeah, they've got that working, right? So now that I'm under the regular portal, we don't get the grid, and everything is kind of as it should be, I guess. We're going to cancel out of this. I have to stop my track again. This time I will delete it later. But just to show one more time, you're going to hit more at the bottom right there. Settings and account. I'm going to change it back though. As Glenn was, right? Was it Glenn? Whoever was talking about that earlier. You know, if you don't have any birds with breeding codes, then you want to just be using the regular Maine eBird data set. But this time of year, it seems like we're getting more and more codes, as the Phoebe nesting by my house would let you know, that they are definitely nesting, and we are confirming them. Yeah, so that's how you do that. No problem. Yeah, happy to help. So,
yeah, so it's 4 o'clock.
Yes.
It's a little past 4, so you know we can wrap up. And if anyone wants to stay on to ask some specific questions, we'll stay on until long as there's questions for us.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I can start again at any points.
Yeah, these are recorded, so we're going to get these up sometime next week on the Atlas website. So the other breakout sessions as well. So if you want to see what was presented in some of the other sessions, you'll be able to do that.
So I am essentially unmuting everybody. Well, I'm giving you, so people can now unmute themselves. I guess if things become too chaotic, then we might have to institute some sort of order. But if you have a question or comments, or I would say unmute yourself, and we'll try to deal with things one by one. I mean, Sandy, you can ask it if you want. Your choice.
There we go. Hi. So I've asked this a couple of times, and I still don't know what to do about it. I tried to do a blockbusting trip up in the Jackman area last year, and we were very careful. We actually did asocial blockbusting before it was cool. We had 2 groups, and we tried to hit all the different habitats, but on different routes, so that we could get in the 20 hours. Looking at the data, I think only 13 were recorded for that priority block that we were pretty sure we got 20 hours in. And I'm pretty sure it was human error on my part that I blew. I was fairly new to using eBird remotely when I didn't have a signal. And I think I clicked on the wrong geocoords. So my data from that block went somewhere. And I don't know how to untangle that.
Ooh.
That might be still on your phone. Some checklist gets saved on your phone within eBird. And
no, Glenn, you're misunderstanding. I submitted the checklists, but I think I submitted them with the wrong, like it said at the end, it said click on the chords for this track. And I think I clicked on the wrong chords.
Oh, I see. So it's in the Atlas portal, the location is wrong.
That's what I think. And I don't have enough technical information myself to try to fix it without screwing more stuff up.
Yeah, so if you know the date, you can go into Atlas eBird, click on My eBird to check all those checklists on that date. And you can actually edit the location if you find the missing checklist.
How do I tell what the right coordinates are to change it to?
You'd have to.
Is there an easy way to do that?
Yeah, you'd reassign it based on a map. So you'd have to remember where
But-
that was.
But you have
But
other points
you know
from
the
that
block.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have other points from that block, right? And so eBird doesn't like all we care about. Like, you don't need to remember exactly where that point was. All you got to do is remember which block you were in and reassign it to a point in that block, and then it will be attributed properly in the atlas. Like, we don't track information below the block scale. So as long as you ballpark it within the block correctly, we could use those data.
So then maybe if I just labeled it with the name of the block and
You'd have
eliminated
to-
the track?
Yeah, here, why don't I see if I can share my screen and I'll show you how to do
Okay.
this.
And if this is totally boring to everybody else, is the meeting over otherwise? Should people stick around if they're interested and go otherwise?
I mean, people, we aren't holding anyone captive here. People can leave whenever they want. I mean, if there's, I haven't seen any other questions in the chat, but if people have other questions they want to ask, then I would suggest people stay around.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in the Maine Bird Atlas eBird portal. I clicked on my eBird, click on manage my checklists. And so I created one earlier today. And so I'm going to open that one up. And so let's assume that I put that one in the wrong location. How would I go about moving that? So if you find the problem checklist, you can, right here, edit location.
Edit location.
So
Okay.
I've got the checklist, edit location.
And I could just change it to a block name there, right? I could just say
Yeah.
like, what was the name of it? Jackman Northwest or whatever it was.
Yep. So if you know the block name, you can assign it to the right block name. You can also just go to the map and
this is the best way to do it, I would say. You could just go to the map and find the correct block and put it in there.
Okay.
And just physically like say, here's the actual lat long, because then it'll actually track that data better.
yeah.
Well, I
So
had a couple of cases that I think the reason that this happened in the first place is I think up there, I don't know if it's because there aren't enough points for it to triangulate, but a couple of times it was placing the data to the east of Jackman when in fact I was birding to the west of Jackman.
Ooh,
yeah,
So
so that might be a bad GPS signal.
Yeah.
That's actually why eBird wants you to confirm the location.
Yeah, I just
on a
didn't know
map.
how, but thank you. That's why this is good for me.
Yeah. And so, that's actually where I was birding. It's probably that exact point that it put down there. So if I wanted to move that, into another block or something, I can put the point there for that checklist.
Okay.
And rename it and everything.
Yep.
So I'll actually back out of it and not.
And so let me
make that.
clarify, did you say that you don't really care about the track? Because I'm wondering what happens to the track
So,
if you relocate the location.
Actually, eBird doesn't store the track. So if you walk 1.5 miles, it figures out the central point of your track, and that's the only thing it records. Is it puts your whole mile-long checklist on one point, and it chooses that point based on the centroid of your track. So
Well,
the
if that's
track
the
is not recorded.
If that's the case, then why were you so concerned about the fact this spring when we were doing the, or I guess it was back this last winter, at the last one of these meetings, you didn't want us going beyond the boundaries, but if it's only going to take the centroid and if you're 90% within your block, then.
well, because you're surveying areas outside the block, right? So we want you to survey inside the block.
Oh,
eBird just
okay.
doesn't do a good job of tracking that. And so the way
Gotcha.
that we can ensure that all the data that you have are from one particular block is to say, don't leave the block.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you.
No problem.
And I'll try to go back and do some forensics and try to figure out where that data is and get it back into where it should be.
Yeah, well, the good news is if you have points that, what was that?
And then you'll have another completed block.
Excellent.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think you actually have a pretty high chance of finding it because you have data that are good from that area. And so
Right.
as long as you can track those down, I think you should be able to hopefully solve it. So
Okay, I'll give it a try, and if not, I'll probably be back on Wednesday night.
Yeah, no, we'd be happy to help if that doesn't help you find the offending checklist and move it to the right location.
I think there's more than one. I think there's at least 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
well, I mean, this is not a particularly uncommon problem. People have issues with eBird putting points in wrong locations, either by their own fault or by eBird's fault, relatively often. So it's good to go over this and make sure people know what tools they have available. There's also problems like with selecting hotspots and things like that, but we won't get into those now. But getting eBird to do what you want it to do is an art for sure.
Well, in the Jackman area, I don't have to worry about hotspots.
It's just you.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now. Does anyone else have a question that they want to, or something they want to discuss with the group here? It seems like people are sort of filtering out, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Learning.
Hopefully this was very helpful, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful 2020 season of being very asocial and birding at the same time.
You bet. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, all. Have a nice day. Enjoy. If you get to get outside a little bit.